Welcome to Gold Derby. I'm Denton Davidson here with Elvis, producer, production designer, and costume designer Catherine Martin, along with production designer Karen Murphy. Thank you for joining me today. Catherine, I have to say I've interviewed quite a few people, and I don't know if I've talked to someone that's so involved in both costumes and production design, and you're a producer, so that's a lot of hats to wear. How did you get roped into so much responsibility on this one?
Well, I'm sort of part of a family business, so it's kind of inevitable that I end up wearing a lot of hats because I have the great pleasure of being there at the very beginning, at the conception of the ideas. Baz describes me as one of his first audiences, so he tells one of the ways that he develops story and develops script is by telling the story over and over again to his closest collaborators. And so I kind of get it because I'm in it for the long haul, I suppose, but it's a great pleasure. And I really enjoy the totality of creating a world from kind of soup to nuts. So I don't find that, burdensome. Sometimes it's a lot, but it's not something that I find unpleasant.
And in terms of the costumes for this, what did you look at and say, okay, I want to recreate this? And then what other things do you have more freedom to just sort of based on the time period and create your own looks?
Well, I think Baz was really clear that he wanted each of the decades we described to be distinct and to support that very kind of each of the eras, I think, have very strong dramatic through lines, and the looks had to support that. I think that with the 50s, because Elvis's style, the what was deemed rebellious or punk or sort of sexually confronting in 1950 has now been absorbed into the lexicon of kind of classic men's dressing. So one of the things Baz got us to focus on was to find a way of reinterpreting or really digging into historical truths, like things that were in Elvis's wardrobe, but trying to find a way of making sure that a modern audience could connect with his very present sexuality and his moves in the way that he dressed, the fact that he was a teen idol, that he was able to galvanize youth, that this look at this particular time in history was very challenging. His hair, particularly to older people and to the parental generation. So it was trying to find that punkishness or that edginess that kind of has got lost because we have come to see the 50s as this fabulously stylish period.
And Karen, what were your thoughts when you were called to be a part of this production? Because it's this epic life saga, one of the all-time biggest stars. Can you talk about your initial thoughts and then how you began to prepare for the film?
Well, I had the good fortune, even though I'm not really part of the Luhrmann family business, to be there quite early. So it's a unique experience when you work in this team. And I had, it really is an absolute privilege because you're given, you have everything at your fingertips. Baz goes all out to try and connect with all the people, and he did in this particular situation, with all the people that he could who were connected to Elvis, who were historians, who know about him. He even sought out very old friends from when he was a boy. So we're around when that's happening. So we sort of, like CM says, we're soaking all of that in. So of course, what happens when you get to the production period and when everybody comes on board, you sort of have this information in your DNA. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's easy to make decisions with UCM. It's sort of more, you just sort of know that that might be right or it might not be right. So it's just a little bit different. There's a very long it's a long prep period, pre-prep period, and it gives you all the tools that you need to go in with you know, so much history and so much knowledge, and you know, one by one the team come on board and you share that with them. So we end up with a very knowledgeable team of people who can also help us with all aspects of the design. So from cars to graphics to set building and painting, everybody's got that information because Baz has encouraged us to sort of speak to as many people as we can, to do trips, to kind of try and understand who Elvis was and all those periods that he lived through, the politics at the time, you know, all of those things are very important. And they're not necessarily design elements themselves, but I think the politics of the time, and like CM was saying, the way people were dressing at the time, it just informs the rest of the design. So, you know, it's always a joy to be involved in a Baz Luhrmann project.
And Bev Dunn did the set decoration, and she was going to join us. She had a conflict and couldn't come, so I want to talk about her while we're still here. And, you know, talk about how you collaborate with Bev as a set decorator. What do you put together? And then what does she kind of come in and sort of fill in? Because I'm always so fascinated by production designs and sets and just every little book on the shelf. And, you know, there's so many pieces that just I find incredibly fascinating. Talk about how you collaborate with Bev.
Well, we've been working, the two of us have been working, Karen and I have been working with Bev since Moulin Rouge days. So it's a very long collaboration. She was the property mistress. And so she has had a child during the shooting of Australia and basically left for 10 days, had the baby and came back to work in very remote and very difficult conditions. So I would describe Bev Dunn as a decorating warrior. Nothing is ever too much for Bev, in the sense that we just continually, I think you would agree, Karen, ask her to, whether it's printing kilometers, digitally printing kilometers of carpet in a pandemic where you can't get trucks from one state to another, or in a kind of COVID world where your resources are relatively limited and you say, I want every single, you know, snowman statue and snowball ornament for an office. And we're in Queensland, which is the equivalent of kind of the state of Florida. So a snowman is not synonymous with where we are. She kind of never balks at any of that. And I think one of Bev's great strength is she understands that the level of detail and the amount of stuff sets actually require. I always think of sets as a sort of, they're like vacuums or black holes of stuff. And you get a sense of it when you move house and you think, how could I have collected all this stuff? You know, and the amount of stuff that humans collect in a short period of time, even if you go on a job and you think I came with one suitcase and I'm leaving with 3 and I just don't know how I expanded my stuff. And so the ability to understand that and also to really lean into the detail. I think one of her tour de forces, which really shows Bev's strength as a decorator, is the set that she creates at the International Hotel. It's Tom Parker's office, and just those layers and layers of history that she manages to create, the kind of support to the drama, the way that she is able through small objects to kind of help tell the story of a character. I know that's one of the sets that everybody on the crew absolutely adored, and it's a surprising one, because you think, oh, well, it's not kind of ginormous or spectacular or particularly opulent. But I think it was because people loved walking around and actually just seeing all the meaningful things that were on the desk that are never actually seen by anyone on screen, but all of Colonel Tom Parker's stationery and business cards and signs that he had made for himself in real life. Like, I can't remember one of them. What's the one that he had printed? It was like some stupid thing, don't bother to ask questions, or donations accepted, or he had all these sort of jokey signs, I think, before they were even a thing, made to kind of put on his desk. So yes, I mean, I don't know what you would have to say about it, Karen, but I think it's like she's kind of, I think we did nearly break her a number of times. I think there could have been a few tears in toilets at times, but she's kind of indomitable in being able to rise to the challenge.
And Karen, for you, what was your biggest challenge on this film? What did you think was the most challenging set piece or thing to build and recreate for the project?
I think one of the something that actually probably seems quite simple, I think, is the 1968 special, the NBC Studios, because I think the way Baz conceived of that sequence is a very pivotal moment in his life, in Elvis's life. They're very important. So much is going on in the world at the time, and he is feeling irrelevant. It's such an important piece in the story, and yet, and it was also filmed. So we had it there. We had what was on TV. We didn't have the backstage. We didn't have as a reference, we didn't have like his room per se. We had rooms at the time, like dressing rooms at the time. Baz had been to the NBC studios and walked those halls, but they still looked a little bit different. But we had the studio itself. So we knew what the set pieces were, but we had to have we had to show a number of numbers. And we also had to have him, the Christmas set, the model of the Christmas set, all of those places that he needed to perform. And like a TV studio, there's a little square box in the middle where he's performing in the leather suit. Then that goes away. Then there's a very shiny floor and an Elvis sign. Then there's, there's things coming and going. So we had to, we did that in one stage, and then we did it appears in the film like they're all in the one environment, but of course that would be the biggest stage in the world. So we had the control room in another stage on the edge of a tank, and inside a soundstage, they often have tanks. So Mandy was able to get down in the tank, and we built the set off the top of the tank so she could get the camera angles she needed to get, so she could have, the eye lines between the two actors. And when Elvis is sort of looking at Colonel Tom Parker. And then we built the hallway with the
Dressing room.
I'm so sorry. The dressing room, and all of that had to connect, and the stairs, and Colonel Tom Parker had to come down. But we sort of, Baz is always very good with geography, and we always spend a lot of time in the prep period working out how we can make that geography serve the story. And I think that was possibly one of our most complicated series. Like Beale Street was a very big, beautiful, textured set with many details and all of that, but essentially it was a backlot, 2 blocks, there it was. And but this one was quite complicated and very, so much was going on story-wise. So I think that would be the one that I think was a bit of a challenge. Yeah.
And interestingly, I think one of the things that you did so cleverly, Karen, on that set is we realized that the lighting package that was directly above the square was going to become a kind of crucial set element because of the way Baz was moving the camera. And of course, what was above was not a piece of scenery. It was real lighting in order for Mandy to be able to shoot. And I think you came up with such a clever way with our gaffer of incorporating period lighting to disguise. I know this sounds so simple, but everybody was very concerned producerially about this, because we were going to be seeing these modern lights so often. It was going to mean that this, what we thought was going to be an entirely shot in camera piece, was going to be all CGI, because we were going to be having to rub out modern lights all the time. And it's those kind of things that, even when you are as prepared and you think that you've got it in the bag, you'll walk on set and you'll realize that there's been this kind of just haven't realized what's going to actually happen on the day. And yeah, it's funny how the most simple of things can pose either the most technically challenging things, that people can become so focused on such a little square, and however prepared you are and you think it's a terribly simple set, that there'll be another enormous hurdle that you need to overcome to keep everyone happy, that you're not spending all your money on rubbing out modern lights, that Mandy and Sean, our gaffer, got the lighting that they needed to film and make beautiful pictures, and we needed the set to look period appropriate. So good on you, Karen. Good job.
And what was the most difficult aspect in terms of costuming? Because I want to make sure we get some of that, and I've just a couple minutes left, so before time runs out, what was that like to just get all of those decades of costuming together?
Look, all I can say about it is I completely underestimated the scale. Because in my mind, I kind of just went, oh, it's real, historically referenced period. I really understand how to do that. But what I forgot to actually calculate in my mind was that there were enormous audience sequences. And even in the 50s alone, it wasn't like we had two audiences that were the same. So they all had cultural nuances that made each of the 350 people that we were costuming, the outfits needed to be different. So if you're at Russwood, he's already successful. People are imitating. It's a more sophisticated way of interpreting Elvis's look. If you're right at the beginning of his career, he's on the road in the deep South. It's a much more country and Western look. You go to the audience at the carnival and they're, again, a completely different, more countrified interpretation of the 50s. So basically what you think is going to be 350 costumes turns out to be 1,200, because you need to be able to describe all those nuances. And when we packed up, or we were packing up and finishing, it was interesting to actually see what 9,000 separate and distinct outfits, shoes, underpants, shirt, belt, looked like. And it filled an entire soundstage. And one of our COVID coordinators had a drone, and he actually did this incredible drone shot where you just travel over, and it just literally feels epic. It kind of does give you chills, because when you're in the trenches, you don't see that, but it was just miles and miles of clothes.
Yeah. Well, it's just an epic saga, an epic life. So many sets and designs. It was just so impressive to see. Congratulations on all of your work, and best of luck to each of you throughout this upcoming award season. And thank you for taking some time to chat with Gold Derby today.
Thank you.